Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjanaya Jamuna Tiravanachariya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasho Jamuna Tiravanachariya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasho Jamuna Tiravanachariyam Yamuna Tiravanachariyam Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijayacharya Storu Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijayacharya Storu Srimad Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantikoti Vaishnav Vrindi Ki. Naam Acharya Sila Haridas Thakur Ki. Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai. Sisi Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Navadip Dham Ki Jai. Gangamai Jamunamai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Tulasi Devi Ki. Samavaita Bhakta Vrindi Ki. Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki. So today we're reading from the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. I think it's chapter 4. Yes, chapter 4, Text number 5 and 6. 5. Tam sarika kanduke darpanam bhuja Sveta patapatra vyajana srag adibi Gitayani dundibi sanka vinubi Vrishendramaropya vitankitayayu Tam sarika kanduka darpanam bhuja Sveta tapatra vyajana srag adibi Gitayane dundibi sanka vinubir Vrisendram Dwaropya Vitankitayayu. The translation. The disciples of Lord Shiva arranged for Sati to be seated on the back of a bull and gave her the bird which was her pet. They bore a lotus flower, a mirror and all such paraphernalia for her enjoyment and covered her with a great canopy. Followed by a singing party with drums, conch shells and bugles, the entire procession was pompous as a royal parade. So there's no purport to that verse. We'll do the next verse. Abrahmagoso rijata yagya vaisasam Abrahmagoso rajita yagya vaisasam Viprarasi justam vibudayascha sarvasa Viprarasi justam vibudayascha sarvasa Mridarvaya kanchana dharma charma bhi Mridarvaya kanchana dharma charma bhi Nisrista bandham yajanam samavisa Abrahmagoso rijate yagya vaisasam Viprarasi justam vibudayascha sarvasa Mridarvaya kanchana dharma charma bhi Nisrista bandham yajanam samavisa Abrahmagoso rijata yagya vaisasam Viprarasi justam vibudayascha sarvasa Mridarvaya kanchana dharma charma bhi Nisrista bandham yajanam samavisa Abrahmagoso rijata yagya vaisasam Viprarasi justam vibudayascha sarvasa Mridarvaya kanchana dharma charma bhi Nisrista bandham yajanam samavisa Abrahmagoso rijita yagya vaisasam Viprarasi justam vibudayascha sarvasa Mridarvaya kanchana dharma charma bhi Nisrista bandham yajanam samavisat. Word for word. Word for word. From all sides. Brahma Gosha, with the sounds of Vedic hymns. Ujjita, decorated. Yagya, sacrifice. Vaisasam, destruction of animals. Viprarasijustam, attended by the great sages. Vibhudaye, with demigods. Cha, and. Sarvasa, on all sides. Mrit, clay. Daru, wood. Aya, iron. Kanchana, gold. Darba, kusha grass. Charmabi, skins. Nisrista, made of. Bandham, sacrificial animals and pots. Yajanam, sacrifice. Samavisad, entered. Translation. She then reached her father's house where the sacrifice was being performed and entered the arena where everyone was chanting the Vedic hymns. The great sages, brahmanas and demigods were all assembled there. And there were many sacrificial animals as well as pots made of clay, stone, gold, grass and skin, which were all requisite for the sacrifice. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. When learned sages and brahmanas assemble to chant Vedic mantras, some of them also engage in arguing about the conclusion of the scriptures. Thus some of the sages and brahmanas were arguing, and some of them were chanting the Vedic mantras. So the entire atmosphere was surcharged with transcendental sound vibration. This transcendental sound vibration has been simplified in the transcendental vibration Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In this age, no one is expected to be highly educated in the Vedic ways of understanding, because people are very slow, lazy and unfortunate. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya has recommended the sound vibration Hare Krishna. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 5th chapter, text number 32, it is also recommended, Yagye Sankirtan Prair Yajantihi Sumeda Saha. At the present moment, it is impossible to gather sacrificial necessities because of the poverty of the population and the lack of knowledge in Vedic mantras. Therefore, for this age, it is recommended that people gather together and chant the Hare Krishna mantra to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is accompanied by His associates. Indirectly, this indicates Lord Chaitanya, who is accompanied by His associates, Nityananda, Advaita and others. That is the process of performing yajna in this age. Another significant point in this verse is that there were animals for sacrifice. That these animals were meant for sacrifice does not mean that they were meant to be killed. The great sages and realized souls assembled were performing yajnas, and the realizations was tested by animal sacrifice, just as in modern science tests are made on animals to determine the effectiveness of a particular medicine. The brahmanas entrusted with the performance of yajna were very realized souls, and to test the realization, an old animal was offered in the fire and rejuvenated. This was the test of a Vedic mantra. The animals gathered were not meant to be killed and eaten. The real purpose of a sacrifice was not to replace a slaughterhouse, but to test a Vedic mantra by giving an animal new life. Animals were used to test the power of Vedic mantras, not for meat. So the verse again. She then reached her father's house, where the sacrifice was being performed, and entered the arena where everyone was chanting the Vedic hymns. The great sages, brahmanas and demigods were all assembled there, and many sacrificial animals as well as pots made of clay, stone, gold, grass and skin, which were all requisite for the sacrifice. So here's a very extensive purport by Srila Prabhupada, and as usual, his purports are very informative, and here we see again many subject matters being discussed. But we'll just go to verse number 5 first, where it's talking about the disciples of Lord Shiva arranged for Sati to be seated on a back of a bull and gave her the bird which was her pet. So here, following on from text 4, Sati was in a hurry. She was going very quickly to her father's house. But a procession was arranged. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, there's mention of various things here in this particular verse. For example, the bird and other items indicate an attraction to playing. And the instruments indicates an attraction to music. And in the word for word, they talk about a white umbrella and other items indicates her royal status. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur give that commentary to that particular verse. There's no purport to that verse. But then she reached her father's house, and there was a sacrifice being performed. And there were many brahmanas, and they were reciting Vedic mantras. And it's interesting that the brahmanas were arguing about the conclusion of the scriptures. And some were chanting the Vedic hymns. Now, this is important. The hymns being chanted, that's important by the brahmanas. But when they're arguing on the basis of scripture. And we'll deal with it a little later with some verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Srimad Bhagavatam. But the environment is important, because you can see that she had come into into like a sort of spiritual environment with brahmanas, with Vedic hymns. And in our own practices, a spiritual environment is important. You can be in the temple and still be unhappy and still be in another world. The environment, the people who create the environment, that's important, because a temple without devotees, what it'll mean? It'll mean nothing. It means nothing. So the environment is created by the devotees. And therefore, if the devotees need to be at a good level to influence the environment. Yeah, they were arguing on the conclusion of the scriptures, and some were chanting the Vedic mantras. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I was reading it late last night, I found a very beautiful verse that talking about the Vedic sound vibration, Omkar. The principal word in the Vedic literatures is the basis of all Vedic vibrations. Therefore, one should accept Omkar as a sound representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the reservoir of the cosmic manifestation. So we all know about Om. It's transcendental. We're quite familiar with that. And this, in the purport, Prabhupada writes that this Omkar is a direct representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And at the time, if one remembers Om, that means he is remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he's transferred to the spiritual planet. And sometimes we think, it's just that the Hare Krishna mantra. There's once an Indian, Indian national, was in America with Prabhupada. He somehow came in contact with Prabhupada, and he was chanting Om. And then Prabhupada said, no, you must chant Om Krishna. He added Krishna to it. Because sometimes, the impersonalists, they also vibrate Om, but they don't recognize Krishna as the personality of God having a form. That's the reason. So even if one chants in the end Omkar, that is a representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Prabhupada writes that he can go back to Godhead. And he quote various scriptures or various verses from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, text 13. And I'll read what he says here. If one actually understands that Omkar is a sound representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whether he chants Omkar or the Hare Krishna mantra, the result is certainly the same. Because sometimes we may have a different understanding. And then he quotes the verse, that was from 8:13. Then he quotes Bhagavad Gita again, 9:17, where Krishna says, I'm the father of the universe, the mother, the support and the grandsire. I'm the object of knowledge, the purifier, and the syllable Om. I'm also the Rig, Sam, and Yajur Vedas. So again, Krishna says, I'm that purifier and the syllable Om. So throughout the Vedic literatures, throughout the Bhagavatam, throughout the other scriptures, like the Rig, the Sam, the Yajur, the other Vedas, Omkar is mentioned. And Jiva Goswami in this Bhakti Sandarbha says that in the Vedic literature, Omkar is considered to be the sound vibration of the holy name of the personality of Godhead. And there are other acharyas like Sridhar Swami. Sridhar Swami also speaks about the potency of Om. So in this first three lines of the purport, it's talking about Brahmanas who were arguing and some were chanting these Vedic mantras. And there is also other scriptures quoted like the Narada Pancharatra, the Mandukya Upanishad. This is an interesting point. It declares that whatever one sees in the spiritual world is also an expansion of the spiritual potency of Omkar. And Omkar is the origin, middle, and the end. And it's an extensive purport, but I'll just read something else here that I found interesting. Since Omkar is the basic principle of Vedic knowledge, it is uttered before one begins to chant any Vedic hymn. Without Omkar, no Vedic mantra is successful. The Goswamis therefore declare that the Pranava Omkar is complete representation of the personality of Godhead, and they have analyzed Omkar in terms of its alphabetical constituents as follows. So like you have A, U, M. The A refers to Krishna. The U refers to Radharani. And the M refers to the jivas, the living entities. So the acharyas have broken this down, what the meaning is. So like this we get an idea of the sound. And sound, our movement is based on on sound. We see sati, there was a great discussion. There's a lot of repetition, if you look at the verses, there's a lot of repetition of satis, which we're discussing over the few weeks now, about her being in Maya. Arjuna made a very nice point, Arjuna Prabhu, to me, that a man has one family, but the woman has two families. Two families, meaning the father's side and the husband's side. So the loyalty is split. You have a split loyalty. It's an interesting point, I thought, because although we could say, yes, she was in Maya and there's so many other things, but still this is a very good point, because one will take that into account. Well, that's my father, I have to go there. There's split loyalty. So when she went, she experienced this, with the other verses will come, she experienced some challenges from the family members, or especially her father. But Prabhupada writes in this purport, there's actually 3 points that are important. One is discussing the Vedic hymns and the Brahmanas, the chanting and the sound vibration. Then it talks about the Hare Krishna mantra, and then lastly it talks about the Hare Krishna mantra and quotes the verse from the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11.5.32, which is quoted, and there's a purport in the CC and the Srimad Bhagavatam extensively talking about the holy name. So there are 3 points, and then it talks about testing the Brahmana's strength. What is the strength of the Brahmana? So I found 3 points that are important for us to just quickly go through. Now Brahmanas, they may not be in the category like they may be engaged in Vedic rituals. But a Vaishnava Brahman is different. A Vaishnava is above a Brahmana. But a Brahmana is an elevated person also, and supposed to have good qualities. And I just wanted to, when I was reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I also found a very interesting discussion when a Brahmana came to see Lord Chaitanya's, the Kirtan performance, but the door was closed, so he could not enter the hall. So generally, if somebody comes and they don't get entrance, then they become very unhappy. But the next day he met Lord Chaitanya on the banks of the Ganges, and then he spoke to him. So the Brahman was expert in talking harshly and cursing others. This is also what happens. Sometimes Brahmanas also curse others. So what he did, he took his Brahman thread and he broke it. He broke his Brahman thread. Because Lord Chaitanya's behavior greatly aggrieved this Brahmana. So the Brahmana's curse to the Lord was, which is a good thing, you shall be bereft of all material happiness. But when Lord Chaitanya heard this, he felt great jubilation. Any faithful person who hears of this Brahman's cursing Lord Chaitanya, if he hears this pastime, then he is delivered from all Brahmanical curses. It's an interesting point that's made here. But at the same time, one must understand that nobody can curse the Lord, because the Lord is transcendental. He is never subject to any curse or benediction. But as ordinary living entities, we are subjected to that. And the punishments of Yamaraj. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, and I'll read it, when one understands this fact with faith and love, he personally becomes free from all curses uttered by Brahmins or anyone else, the point that we made. So here in the first paragraph we're seeing Brahmanas are arguing each other, they may be disagreeing, and they don't say that they were cursing each other, but disagreement means they were unhappy with each other's conclusions. So then, there's another point where there was a connection between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai. And they are very, Ramananda Rai is an exalted devotee. And Lord Chaitanya really wanted to meet him. So when Ramananda Rai saw Lord Chaitanya, he was sannyasi, he immediately offered his obeisances. And the Lord stood up and asked Ramananda to arise and chant the holy name of Krishna. So just follow this, just to chant the holy name of Krishna. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very pleased and embraced him. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is asking him whether he is Ramananda Rai. And he said yes, but he said, I'm a very low servant, I belong to the Sudra community. He was not in the Brahmanical class. But then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced Ramananda Rai because they have a relationship. Ramananda Rai is Vishaka in Krishna's pastimes. So they embraced each other and they lost consciousness due to ecstatic love. Now when they embraced each other, these ecstatic symptoms started appearing in the body. Perspiration, tears, shivering, standing of the hairs. And the word Krishna came from their mouths falteringly because they were shivering. But then there was a group of stereotype ritualistic Brahmins. And these, just like these Brahmins who following principles, Vedic principle. So when they saw this manifestation of this love, they were struck with wonder. Because they couldn't understand this. So they began to reflect. So therefore these type of experiences, is generally not shown in the presence of a non-devotee. And they began to reflect. Because they could see that, Lord Chaitanya, his luster, his effulgence. And Lord Chaitanya was crying, but they were considering, how could somebody, as a sannyasi, embrace a Sudra, a fourth-class person on the social order, and have these experiences? How is that possible? Because Ramananda Rai was the governor of Madras. How was it possible? So while the Brahmanas were thinking like this in this way about their activities, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw those outsiders and he restrained his transcendental emotions. So even if Brahmanas are present, but even if they're so elevated, because they're attached to Vedic ritualistic processes, one cannot show these emotions in their presence. Because Ramananda Rai was in the intimate circle of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the word that is used is called Sajatiya. A person with the intimate circle of the Lord. Sajatiya. But those people who were followers of the Brahmanas who were followers of Vedic rituals were not able to have an intimate connection with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And they are called Vijitaya Loka. In other words, they were not pure devotees. And they were outside devotional service. In other words, a non-devotee. But they restrained their emotions upon seeing this outsider Brahmins. So similarly, even in the temple, if a whole group of people who are not practicing Krishna consciousness, and they may be in the Brahman class and elevated to that level, they will have an effect on the devotees also. And the devotee must be quick, or must be, must know that and restrain his ecstasy. This is what has been mentioned. So the arguments were going on with them, with the different Brahmana, and there's a verse in the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I forget. I think it is the 6th canto, where it speaks about, and I'll just paraphrase it. All contradictions can be reconciled in you. Many modern theologians argue about right and wrong without knowing what is actually right. These arguments are always false and their judgments inconclusive. Why? And there are reasons given. Because they have no authorized evidence with which to gain knowledge of you. Because their minds are agitated by scriptures containing false conclusions. They are unable to understand the truth concerning about you. Furthermore, because of polluted eagerness to arrive at the right conclusion. And as we know, the Lord is without a second, and therefore in you, contradictions like doing and not doing, happiness and distress are not contradictory. Your potency is so great that it can do and undo anything as you like. Since there is no duality in your constitutional position, you can do everything by the influence of your energy. This is a verse from the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th chapter, text number 36. The points that I just raised now. Now, dry arguments are inconclusive. And in the Madhya Lila, the 17th chapter, text 186, there is a verse which talks about this, how dry arguments are inconclusive. And a great personality whose opinion does not differ from others is not considered a great sage. Simply by studying the Vedas, which are variegated, one cannot come to the right path by which religious principles are understood. Even if you study the Vedas very extensively and go through all the scriptures, still you may not come to the correct conclusion. Why? And in that verse, it is answered. The solid truth of religious principle is hidden in the heart of an unadulterated, self-realized person. That's where because you can know all the verses, but still you'll not be able to present it to get the conclusion. That's another thing. So consequently, all the Shastras confirm one should accept progressive path the Mahajans advocate. So we follow in the path of the Mahajans. Then there's another verse from, this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Yamaraj is addressing the Yamadutas. Because they are bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Yagnavalkya, Jaimini and other compilers of the religious scriptures cannot know the secret of confidential religious system of the 12 Mahajans. Therefore it is important for us to follow the Mahajans and of course Prabhupada, the Goswamis, because they cannot understand the transcendental value of performing devotional service or chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Because their minds are too attached to ritualistic ceremonies, which are obviously mentioned in the Vedas. And people are very busy collecting ritualistic ingredients for ritualistic ceremonies. But they yield temporary results, because you can go to Swarga Loka for material happiness. And people are not attracted to the Sankirtan movement. Instead, they are interested in Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. But then the question may arise that, chanting is such an easy process, then why people do so many Vedic ritualistic ceremonies, and why people are attracted to them? Why? But that's in the verse 15:15 of the Bhagavad Gita. Vedayascha sarva aham eva vedya. That's one line of the verse. But what is the real purpose of studying the Vedas is to approach the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. But because people are so attracted to the Vedic yajnas, this gorgeous sacrifice, and they spend huge amounts of money and on these ceremonies, on these ritualistic ceremonies, they cannot come to Krishna. Just like when Srila Prabhupada, when he established the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan, they were obliged to have Vedic ceremonies enacted by Brahmanas. Why? Because the inhabitants of Vrindavan, especially the smarter Brahmins, would not accept Europeans or Americans as bona fide Brahmins. Even up till now, Krishna Balaram temple is a very beautiful temple, but it's not the most busiest temple in India. Still they have this reservations, some of the local people. And therefore Prabhupada had to engage Brahmins to perform costly yajnas. But at the same time, he introduced the chanting. While the yajna was going on, the mridangas were playing, the kartals were playing. And he considered the chanting of the Hare Krishna more beneficial or more important than the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. So, because if they have not done so, then the people would not come, they wouldn't take the installation very seriously. I remember meeting that person who performed those sacrifices. Very Paka person, Paka Brahman, yeah. But in the Bhagavatam it's explained that for this age of Kali, Sankirtan alone is sufficient. If we just chant in the presence of the deities, and if we just chant the Hare Krishna mantra, then there is no need to do any other performances or other ritualistic activities. And although, Sukracharya was telling Lord Vishnu, although there may be discrepancies in pronouncing the mantras, observing the regulative principles, and there may be discrepancies regarding time, place, circumstance, paraphernalia, but when the holy name is chanted, everything becomes faultless. Everything becomes faultless. So, we can discuss a little bit about the holy name. To improve our bhakti, we have to chant the holy names loudly. Like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say, he stressed the chanting of the holy names loudly, especially to improve bhakti. Therefore, we do japa and we do sankirtan, chanting the holy names loudly, or harinam. Krishna and Krishna's name are not two entities. Krishna is his name and the holy name is Krishna. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was quite intelligent, and he knew the conclusion of the scriptures. He dealt with Vedic ritualistic brahmanas, but he was not very adept. He was not very skilled or proficient in leading kirtan. Because kirtan is not performed for some sensual satisfaction. Sometimes we worry about the melodious tunes. But our idea is to satisfy the senses of Krishna. And that is important. For me, I really don't follow musicians. I'll be honest. It really doesn't mean much to me. But at the same time, I'm not disrespectful. They have talent and they're using it in Krishna's service. But personally for myself, I don't follow musicians. Like the Bengalis and Oriyas, they were very good. Very good kirtanias. But they would sing in a very, showy manner, and they would pound the drum. You see sometimes even devotees, they'll be pounding the drum, but they are not chanting the mantra. I've seen it. So that is not the way how kirtan is performed. Yeah. Because, when you sing sweetly or you play instrument and you may be an attractive speaker, that tend to attract the opposite sex and prestige comes. So one has to be careful about that. Like once one disciple was telling Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to tell a particular devotee, Ananta Vasudev, to chant Yashomati Nandan because he chants nicely. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's response was good. So was strong. He said, that is the wrong attitude. All kirtan should be for Krishna's pleasure, not for you to hear and enjoy. That's how it's done. Yeah. Even Bhaktivinoda Thakur had a disciple who was an accomplished musician. And this accomplished musician, was crooning, was with intricate vocal modulations. He was saying, Rai Jago, meaning Radha wake up, Radha wake up. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was informed and he asked, and he stopped that recital. He said, first wake up yourself before you wake Radharani up. Wake yourself up first. Because only when you have come to that platform, that original spiritual platform, is it proper to think of waking up Srimati Radharani. Like we do it as sadhana. We get up Radharani. But we're not on that platform. So he stopped that person. So even in japa, that's kirtan, in japa, his idea was to chant 64 rounds. If one didn't chant 64 rounds, he was considered fallen. But he was a little different because he had because the people lived in the math and they were busy with multifarious services. And for him, the way he looked at it, that chanting japa and doing service was non-different. But then also, there were different standards they had. And he said, if you didn't do your japa, then you should sleep less. Because his idea was that you have a lot of time, but you get engaged in prajalpa. Like the preachers and managers had no fixed time for chanting, but they were expected to chant 16 rounds. Although he said 64. They were meant to do 16. Householders who lived outside, they could do 4 rounds. So there are different standards. And he said if you rise around early in the morning, your sleep just breaks at 2 o'clock, you shouldn't go back to sleep, but you start chanting. So, these are the different standards set by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. But for us, we have to chant 16 rounds. All of us. And Prabhupada is very strong about us chanting our 16 rounds. Or he used very strong language. If a person can't chant his 16 rounds, he's an animal. He's an animal. Now that's a strong statement. So therefore for us, we are meant to chant our 16 rounds every day and follow the principle. So that's the difference between japa and kirtan. Now coming back to the last part of it, is where these Brahmins could test the power of their mantra, or their power, their purity, by putting an old animal into the fire and coming out with a new body. Now we can test, we should also apply a test, but to the chanting of Hare Krishna. In the sense that we should chant so purely that, the holy name enters our heart and we experience these symptoms of tears flowing from our eyes. But that will come. It's not that we force ourselves to do that. But then, that's the test. Because if we're not shedding tears from our eyes when we're chanting Hare Krishna, we can understand our heart, in the Bhagavatam is explained, is steel framed. It's hard. So you don't feel that bliss of chanting Hare Krishna. So this is our test. And that we don't have to go now publicly or tell people publicly, oh, I'm feeling this experience, tears are flowing from my eyes. We don't do that. But we keep it to ourselves. Just like when Lord Chaitanya, after chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, he had all these experiences. So what did he do? He went to his spiritual master and he said, I'm having these experiences, to confirm it. And the spiritual master was very pleased, Ishvara Puri, that his disciple was chanting the mantra and experiencing this bliss. This should be our test. So we'll stop here. It's a few minutes. I just have 1 or 2 minutes. Is there any comments or question on what we spoke on? Thank you very much. Like to comment on it? Anybody? Shagi Prabhu? Okay, thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki.